You saved me, the Mafia boss shouted, staring at the poor waitress after collapsing in the restaurant. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you saved the life of someone dangerous? Someone who could either protect you forever or destroy you with a single word. Today's story is about a simple act of kindness that changed 2 lives forever. You saved me, Dominic Russo shouted, his voice a mixture of disbelief and suspicion as he stared up at the waitress from the diner floor. His hand gripped her wrist with surprising strength for a man who just collapsed. What did you put in my coffee? Lucia Moretti felt the eyes of every remaining customer drilling into her back. The most feared man in the city was accusing her of poisoning him, and no one was stepping forward to help. I didn't do anything, she whispered urgently. You need a hospital. His eyes, dark and dangerous, even clouded with pain, narrowed. No hospitals. They'll finish what they started. And that's how Lucia's ordinary life collided with the extraordinary world of Dominic Russo. But let me take you back to how it all began just a few hours earlier on that fateful night. The fluorescent lights of Bella Notte flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the checkered linoleum floor. Lucia wiped her calloused hands on her faded apron, the once white fabric now stained with countless spills from 12-hour shifts. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wisps escaping to frame her face as she balanced 3 plates along her arm with practiced precision. Order up for table 7, she called, her voice barely audible over the clatter of the busy diner. At 26, Lucia's dreams of art school had long been replaced by the reality of supporting her younger brother through college. Their parents' medical debts had fallen to her after their passing 2 years ago, leaving her with little choice but to work double shifts at the diner and weekend gigs at the local catering company. The apartment above the diner wasn't much, a cramped 2-bedroom with temperamental plumbing and windows that rattled when the wind blew, but the reduced rent was a blessing she couldn't afford to lose. Every dollar she saved on housing went straight to Marco's tuition or chipping away at the mountain of debt that threatened to bury her. You're working yourself to death, Marco had told her just last night, his eyes filled with the guilt of watching his sister sacrifice everything for him. I'm fine, she'd insisted, the same way she always did. Just focus on your studies. One doctor in the family will make all this worth it. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Lucia from her thoughts. Her gaze instinctively flicked toward the entrance and her breath caught in her throat. Everyone in town knew Dominic Russo, or at least they knew of him. His family had controlled the city's underbelly for generations, their legitimate businesses merely a veneer over more lucrative enterprises. Dominic had taken over 5 years ago after his father's mysterious retirement, and rumors of his ruthlessness had only grown since then. He entered alone, unusual for a man who typically traveled with an entourage of suited men with bulges beneath their jackets. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than Lucia made in 3 months, the crisp white shirt underneath unbuttoned just enough to reveal a glimpse of tanned skin and the glint of a gold chain. The diner fell silent, conversations cutting off mid-sentence as recognition rippled through the room. A mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man suddenly became fascinated with his meatloaf. 2 teenagers who'd been laughing loudly moments before hunched over their milkshakes, eyes down. Seat yourself anywhere, Lucia called out automatically before realizing who she was addressing. Dominic's dark eyes met hers briefly, something unreadable flickering across his features before he nodded and slid into a corner booth. The other patrons studiously avoided looking in his direction, conversations resuming in whispers. You're not seriously going to serve him? Hissed Gina, another waitress who'd pressed herself against the counter as if trying to melt into it. It's my section, Lucia replied, grabbing a menu and water. And he's a customer like anyone else. He's not like anyone else and you know it, Gina muttered, but Lucia was already moving toward his table. She approached with caution, years of serving difficult customers having taught her to read body language. Up close, she noticed the shadows beneath his eyes, the slight pallor to his normally olive complexion. Welcome to Bella Notte, she said, placing the water before him. Can I start you with something to drink? Just coffee. Black. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a roughness that suggested either too many cigarettes or too little sleep. As she turned to fetch his coffee, she noticed his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the water glass. Strange for a man whose very presence commanded fear and respect. When she returned with the coffee, he was staring out the window, his reflection ghostly against the darkness outside. For a moment, with his guard down, he looked almost human. Tired. Troubled. "Ready to order?" she asked, pen poised above her notepad. He glanced at the menu, then back at her. "Just soup. Whatever's fresh." "The minestrone was made this morning," she offered. "Fine." As she turned to place his order, she felt his eyes following her. Not in the way men sometimes watched her, with hunger or entitlement, but with curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. The night progressed, the diner gradually emptying as the hour grew late. Dominic remained in his corner, nursing his coffee, occasionally checking his phone. He'd ordered only soup, barely touching it before pushing it aside. By 11, only a few stragglers remained. Lucia began her closing duties, wiping down counters and refilling condiments. She approached Dominic's table hesitantly. "We're closing soon," she said. "Can I get you anything else?" He looked up, and Lucia was struck by the sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the diner's aggressive air conditioning. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice sounded strained. "Are you sure? You don't look well." The words slipped out before she could stop them. His eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask for your concern." "No charge for it," she replied with a shrug, surprising herself with her boldness. "It comes with the coffee." For a moment, something like amusement flickered across his face, softening the hard lines. Then it was gone, replaced by a grimace as he pressed a hand to his stomach. "Mr. Russo?" Lucia took a step closer, professional distance forgotten as she recognized the signs of someone in serious pain. "I need to go," he muttered, reaching for his wallet and tossing several large bills on the table, far more than his meal had cost. As he stood to leave, he swayed slightly, one hand gripping the edge of the table. "Are you okay?" Lucia asked, instinct overriding her better judgment about getting involved in a dangerous man's business. "I said I'm—" His words cut off as his knees buckled. If you want to know what happens next in this unexpected encounter between a waitress with a heart of gold and the city's most dangerous man, hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when these two worlds collide. Now let's see what happens when an ordinary waitress makes an extraordinary choice. Lucia lunged forward, somehow managing to catch his substantial weight before he hit the floor. They both tumbled awkwardly into the booth, his head landing against her shoulder. "Mr. Russo?" she gasped, feeling the heat radiating from him through his expensive suit. "You're burning up." His eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding their depths. "What did you do to me?" he growled, though the effect was diminished by the weakness in his voice. "Nothing. You collapsed," Lucia said, reaching for her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." His hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping her wrist. "No hospitals." "But you need." "No. Hospitals." Each word was punctuated with labored breathing. "They'll be watching." The few remaining customers were staring now, some with phones already out recording the scene. Lucia could practically see the social media posts forming. "Mafia boss collapses at local diner." "Everyone out," she called, her voice stronger than she felt. "We're closed. Now." To her surprise, they listened, gathering their belongings and shuffling toward the door, though not without backward glances and whispers. Gina approached cautiously. "Should I call 911? She asked, eyeing Dominic with a mixture of fear and fascination. "No," Lucia and Dominic said simultaneously. "Just go home, Gina. I'll handle this." "Are you sure?" "He looks." "I'm sure." "Please." After a moment's hesitation, Gina nodded and retreated, leaving Lucia alone with the semi-conscious crime lord slumped against her. Lucia's mind raced. She wasn't equipped to handle whatever this was. A medical emergency involving the city's most dangerous man. But something in his eyes, a vulnerability she'd never expected to see there, made her hesitate. "My brother's in medical school," she found herself saying. "My apartment's just upstairs. If you can make it that far, he can at least tell us if you need a hospital regardless of who might be watching." Dominic studied her face, searching for deception. Finding none, he gave a curt nod. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Ask me again when you're not about to pass out on my floor," she replied, slipping her shoulder under his arm. "Can you stand?" With a grunt of effort, he pushed himself upright, leaning heavily against her. Lucia staggered slightly under his weight but managed to steady them both. "Keys," she muttered, fumbling in her apron pocket while trying to keep him upright. "Got them. Now for the hard part." Getting him up the narrow staircase to her apartment was a challenge that left them both breathless. Each step was a negotiation, his legs threatening to give out, her smaller frame straining to support him. By the time she unlocked her door, he was leaning heavily against her, his breathing ragged. "Couch," she directed, guiding him to the worn sofa that dominated her small living room. He sank into it with a groan, eyes closing as his head fell back. In the harsh overhead light of her apartment, Dominic looked worse than he had in the diner. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge and sweat beaded on his forehead. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just exhaustion or a simple illness. Lucia grabbed her phone and stepped into the kitchen, dialing her brother's number. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Lucia? It's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "I need your help," she said, keeping her voice low. "Medical help. And discretion. Are you hurt?" Marco was instantly alert. "Not me. Customer. From the diner. He collapsed, high fever, maybe stomach pain. He refused to go to the hospital." "That's ridiculous. Call an ambulance." "I can't." She took a deep breath. "It's complicated. Just, can you come? Please." There was a pause, then a sigh. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Start with the basics, temperature, pulse, any visible symptoms." "Thank you," she breathed. "And Marco? Come alone." She ended the call and returned to the living room, where Dominic's eyes were open again, watching her with feverish intensity. "Your brother?" he asked. "He's on his way." She moved to the bathroom, returning with a thermometer and a damp washcloth. "Let's see how bad it is." To her surprise, he submitted to the thermometer without protest. When it beeped, she checked the reading and frowned. 103.2. "That's not good." "I've had worse," he muttered. "Somehow that doesn't reassure me." She pressed the cool cloth to his forehead, noticing how he flinched slightly at her touch before relaxing into it. "When did this start?" "Few hours ago. Thought it was just something I ate. And now?" His eyes met hers, surprisingly lucid despite the fever. "Now I think someone wants me dead." The bluntness of his statement hung in the air between them. Lucia had lived in this city her whole life. She knew what Dominic Russo was, what his family did. Yet here she was, playing nurse to a man who had probably ordered deaths as casually as she ordered coffee. "Why are you helping me?" he asked again, his gaze never leaving her face. Lucia shrugged, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "You needed help. I'm not in the habit of letting people collapse on my floor, even people like you." "People like me," he repeated, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "And what kind of person am I, exactly?" "The dangerous kind," she answered honestly. "The kind most people cross the street to avoid." He laughed, the sound quickly dissolving into a cough. "Smart people." "My brother's on his way," she said, changing the subject. "He says it sounds like you might have been poisoned." Dominic's expression darkened. "Wouldn't be the first attempt." "Is that supposed to be reassuring?" Lucia asked, moving to the kitchen to wet a cloth with cool water. When she returned, she hesitated before pressing the cloth to his forehead. It felt strangely intimate, this simple act of care for a man who probably had people killed with a snap of his fingers. "You're not afraid of me," he observed, his eyes never leaving her face. "I'm terrified," she corrected him. "But you're not exactly threatening at the moment." His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "You saved me," he said, the word somewhere between a question and an accusation. "Don't sound so surprised," Lucia replied, adjusting the cloth. "Not everyone has an agenda. In my experience, everyone does." "Then you've been meeting the wrong people." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dominic tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. "It's just my brother," Lucia assured him, though she approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole before opening it. Marco stood in the hallway, medical bag in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and annoyance. "This better be good, Luce. I have an exam tomorrow." His words died as he stepped inside and saw who was on the couch. "Holy shit." "Marco," Lucia warned. "That's Dominic Russo," he hissed, pulling her aside. Do you have any idea who he is? What he does? Yes, and right now he needs medical help. He needs the police. Keep your voice down, she urged. Please just look at him. Tell me what's wrong. After that we can decide what to do. Marco stared at her for a long moment, then sighed in resignation. Fine. But if I end up in the river wearing concrete shoes, I'm coming back to haunt you. He approached Dominic cautiously, setting his bag on the coffee table. Mr. Russo, I'm Marco Moretti. I'm a medical student. My sister says you're experiencing symptoms consistent with poisoning. Dominic's eyes, sharp despite his condition, assessed Marco. Your sister has a habit of stating the obvious. She also has a habit of helping people who don't deserve it, Marco replied evenly. May I examine you? After a tense moment, Dominic nodded. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence as Marco checked Dominic's vitals, asked clinical questions about symptoms and onset, and examined his pupils and abdomen. Well, Lucia asked when her brother finally straightened. It's definitely poisoning, Marco confirmed. Something in his system is causing acute gastritis and fever. Without blood tests, I can't tell you exactly what, but given the symptoms and rapid onset, I'd guess it was in something he consumed in the last few hours. The coffee, Dominic said, his voice strained. It tasted different. Bitter. Lucia felt a chill run through her. I served you that coffee. You didn't poison me, he said with surprising certainty. You wouldn't have brought me here if you had. Then who? Marco asked. Dominic's expression hardened. I have enemies. More than I can count. He should go to a hospital, Marco insisted, turning to Lucia. This is beyond what I can treat with my limited supplies. No hospitals, Dominic repeated firmly. Marco ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Then the best I can do is activated charcoal to absorb whatever's left in your system, anti-nausea medication and hydration. But if your symptoms worsen, you could be looking at organ damage or worse. Do what you can, Dominic said. Marco looked to Lucia, who nodded encouragingly. With a sigh, he opened his medical bag and began removing supplies. I'll need water, he told Lucia. And prepare yourself. This isn't going to be pleasant. If you're enjoying this unexpected encounter between a waitress with compassion and the city's most feared man, hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories. In our next part, we'll see what happens when dawn breaks and these two strangers from different worlds must face the consequences of one night's kindness. Will Dominic's enemies discover where he spent the night? And what price might Lucia pay for her compassion? Stay tuned to find out. When we left off, Marco was preparing to treat the poison Mafia boss in Lucia's apartment. Let's see what happens as this long night continues. Marco's warning proved accurate. The next hour was a grim battle against the poison ravaging Dominic's system. The activated charcoal treatment was messy and undignified, a stark contrast to the powerful man's usual carefully controlled image. Lucia held a basin, averted her eyes when possible, and tried not to think about the surreal nature of the situation. Through it all, Dominic maintained a stoic silence, only occasionally letting a groan escape when the pain became too intense to mask. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the couch, but he never complained, never begged for relief. That should help absorb any remaining toxins, Marco said finally, disposing of the last of the supplies. The anti-nausea medication should kick in soon. Keep him hydrated. Small sips, nothing too cold. He pulled Lucia into the kitchen, lowering his voice. I've done what I can, but he needs proper medical care. This is serious, Lucia. I know, she sighed, glancing back at Dominic, who had closed his eyes, his breathing shallow but steady. But if he won't go to a hospital, then his choices are limited, Marco finished. Look, I have to go. I've got that exam in the morning and I've already stayed longer than I should. I understand. Thank you for coming. Marco hesitated, concern etched across his features. You're not planning to stay alone with him, are you? What choice do I have? I can't exactly kick him out in this condition. Call his people. He must have someone who can take him off your hands. Lucia shook her head. He doesn't want them to know. Besides, I don't even know how to contact them. His phone. Probably locked. Marco ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This is insane, Lucia. You don't owe him anything. I know, she said softly. But I can't just abandon someone who needs help. You know that. Your compassion is going to get you killed one day, Marco muttered, but there was resignation in his voice. He knew his sister too well to think he could change her mind. Fine. But I'm coming back first thing in the morning. And if anything seems off, you call me immediately. I promise. After Marco left, Lucia returned to the living room, where Dominic was watching her through half-lidded eyes. Your brother doesn't approve of your house guest, he observed, his voice rough but stronger than before. My brother worries about me, she corrected, sitting in the armchair across from him. With good reason, apparently. He's right to be concerned. Dominic shifted, wincing slightly. I'm not someone you should be helping. So you've said. Lucia leaned forward, studying him. Why is that exactly? Because of what you do or because of who's after you? Both. His gaze was direct, unflinching. The people who want me dead wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who helped me. Yet here you are warning me instead of threatening me. She tilted her head. That's not what I expected from Dominic Russo. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. What did you expect? I don't know. Intimidation? Less. She gestured vaguely at him. Vulnerability, he supplied, a hint of bitterness in his tone. Humanity, she corrected. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. For a moment the mask of the feared crime lord slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath. You don't know me, he said finally. No, she agreed. I don't. But I know that even the most dangerous people are still people. He studied her with renewed interest. Philosophy from a waitress. Observation from someone who serves all kinds of people every day. She stood, moving to the kitchen. You should drink something. Water or tea? Water. When she returned with a glass, he took it with a slightly steadier hand, their fingers brushing briefly. The simple human contact seemed to startle him. Thank you, he said, the words sounding unpracticed, as if gratitude was a foreign language to him. You're welcome. She settled back into her chair. So, who tried to kill you? He raised an eyebrow. Direct, aren't you? Seems like a reasonable question under the circumstances. He took a careful sip of water before answering. There's a list. The Venucci family has wanted me dead for years. The Triads think I'm encroaching on their territory. The police commissioner would sleep better if I disappeared. Busy man, she remarked dryly. To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger, almost approachable. The laugh quickly turned into a cough, and he pressed a hand to his side. Don't make me laugh, he groaned. It hurts. Sorry. He wasn't, not really. That brief glimpse of normalcy had been worth it. As the night wore on, Dominic's condition gradually improved. The fever remained, but the worst of the stomach pain seemed to ease. Lucia brought him more water, checked his temperature periodically, and tried not to think about how surreal the situation was. Around 3 in the morning, as she was replacing the cool cloth on his forehead, he caught her wrist gently. Why are you really doing this? He asked, his voice low in the quiet apartment. The truth. Lucia considered deflecting again but found herself answering honestly. My parents died 2 years ago. Car accident. They were coming home from their anniversary dinner when a drunk driver hit them. She sat on the edge of the coffee table facing him. The driver was some rich kid, son of a city councilman. He walked away with community service and a suspended license. No jail time, not even a real fine. The system protects its own, Dominic observed. Yes. But that's not my point. She met his gaze steadily. After the sentencing, I was so angry. I wanted revenge. I fantasized about making him suffer the way we were suffering. I even followed him once, watched him laughing with friends outside a bar like nothing had happened. What stopped you? My brother. He reminded me that becoming the thing I hated wouldn't bring our parents back. That the best revenge was to live well, to be the people they raised us to be. He shrugged. So that's what I try to do. Help when I can. Show kindness when it's needed. Even to people others might think don't deserve it. Dominic was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Your parents would be proud, he said finally. The simple statement, delivered without artifice, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. Get some rest, she said, standing. The worst seems to be past, but you need to recover your strength. What about you? I'll be fine. I've pulled all-nighters before. Despite her assurance, exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. As Dominic's eyes drifted closed, Lucia curled up in the armchair, pulling a throw blanket over herself. Just a few minutes of rest, she told herself, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. She didn't mean to fall asleep, but the stress of the night and the late hour eventually overcame her vigilance. Her last conscious thought was that she should be more afraid than she was of the dangerous man sleeping on her couch. Dreams came in fragmented images. Her parents smiling at her graduation, Marco in a doctor's coat, the diner filled with faceless customers. Then darker visions, men in suits with guns, her brother in danger, Dominic's face contorted in pain. She woke with a start, disoriented in the gray light of early dawn. For a moment she couldn't remember why she was in the armchair instead of her bed. Then her gaze fell on the couch and memory flooded back. Dominic was sitting up, watching her with clear eyes. The fever had broken, leaving him pale but alert. In the soft morning light, with his suit rumpled and his hair disheveled, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. You stayed, he said, surprise evident in his tone. It's my apartment, she pointed out, stretching to ease the kinks in her neck. You could have called my people. The number's in my phone. And tell them what? That I had their boss passed out on my couch? No thanks. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair point. She stood, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. How are you feeling? Better. He ran a hand through his hair, attempting to restore some order to his appearance. Thanks to you and your brother. Good. She moved to the kitchen, needing coffee and distance from the intensity of his gaze. Are you hungry? I can make toast or eggs. No. He followed her, leaning against the doorframe with a casualness that belied the power he wielded. I've imposed enough. Lucia busied herself with the coffee maker, aware of him watching her. The morning light streaming through the small kitchen window illuminated dust motes dancing in the air between them, creating an oddly peaceful tableau. Your apartment, he said suddenly. It's nice. She glanced around at the cramped kitchen with its outdated appliances and chipped countertops, then back at him with skepticism. It's small and old. But it's home. It feels like one, he said, and there was something in his voice, a hint of longing, perhaps, that made her wonder about the places he called home. Do you live alone? She asked, surprising herself with the personal question. Yes. He didn't elaborate and she didn't press. The coffee finished brewing and she poured 2 mugs, offering one to him. He accepted it with a nod of thanks. Black, right? She asked, remembering his order from the diner. Yes. He took a sip, then paused, a shadow crossing his face. Though perhaps I should reconsider that preference. Probably safer with homemade for a while, she agreed, understanding his concern. At least until you figure out who's trying to kill you. An awkward silence fell between them, the reality of their situation settling in with the morning light. A waitress and a mafia boss, an unlikely intersection of worlds that should never have crossed. I should go, he said finally, setting down the half-finished coffee. My absence will have been noticed. Lucia nodded, relief and something like disappointment mingling in her chest. Probably for the best. If you're enjoying this unexpected connection between 2 people from different worlds, hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories. In our next part, we'll see what happens when Dominic tries to return to his dangerous world, and whether Lucia can truly go back to her normal life after this night. Some acts of kindness change us forever, but not always in the ways we expect. Stay tuned to find out what happens next. Morning had arrived, and Dominic was preparing to leave Lucia's apartment after his night of recovery. Let's see what happens as these 2 people from different worlds prepare to part ways. Dominic moved toward the door with only a slight unsteadiness, his natural grace returning as the poison left his system. He paused at the small bookshelf in Lucia's living room, his fingers trailing over the spines of well-worn art books. You're interested in art? He asked, pulling out a volume on Renaissance painters. Lucia took the book from him, returning it to its place with care. I used to be. I wanted to study art history, maybe restoration. Before life got in the way, he finished for her. Something like that. She shrugged, uncomfortable with his perception. It doesn't matter now. It matters, he said simply, his eyes holding hers with unexpected intensity. The things we love always matter. Before she could respond to this surprising philosophy from a man known for his ruthlessness, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a wallet thick with cash. For your trouble. No, she interrupted, surprising them both with her vehemence. I don't want your money. His eyebrows rose. Everyone wants something. Not me. Not from you. She crossed her arms. Consider it a basic human decency that doesn't come with a price tag. He studied her for a long moment as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Finally, he returned the wallet to his pocket and moved toward the door. Dominic, she called as his hand touched the knob. He turned, surprise flickering across his features at her use of his first name. Be careful who pours your coffee. Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, a slight curve of his lips that transformed his entire face. For a moment she glimpsed the man he might have been in another life, one without the weight of his family's legacy. I never did get your name, he said. Lucia. Lucia Moretti. Lucia, he repeated as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. Thank you. And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Lucia stood motionless in the center of her living room, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs. Only when she heard the distant sound of the diner's bell did she release the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The couch still bore the impression of his body, the throw pillow's askew. On the coffee table, his half-empty mug sat next to the medical supplies Marco had left. Evidence that the night had been real, not some strange fever dream of her own. She should be relieved that he was gone, that her brief, dangerous intersection with Dominic Russo's world was over. Instead, she felt oddly hollow, as if something significant had slipped through her fingers before she could fully grasp it. Get it together, Lucia, she muttered to herself, gathering the used towels and medical supplies. It's over. Back to real life. Real life meant a shower, fresh clothes, and a shift at the diner that started in less than 2 hours. No time to dwell on enigmatic crime lords or the strange intimacy of caring for someone through a night of vulnerability. By the time Marco arrived, looking exhausted but determined, Lucia had erased most traces of her unusual guest. Only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the memory of dark eyes watching her remained. You're alive, Marco observed, scanning her face for signs of distress. And alone. That's something. He left about an hour ago, she confirmed, pouring her brother a cup of coffee. Fever broke during the night. He seemed much better this morning. Good. Marco accepted the coffee gratefully. The further Dominic Russo is from our lives, the better. Agreed, Lucia said, though something in her tone must have betrayed her because Marco's eyes narrowed. Lucia, he said warningly. Tell me you're not. I'm not anything, she interrupted. He needed help, I helped him, end of story. Better be, Marco muttered. Men like that don't have friends, Lucia. They have assets and liabilities. Don't become either. His words echoed in her mind as she made her way downstairs to open the diner. Assets and liabilities. Was that how Dominic saw the world? As a ledger to be balanced, people to be used or eliminated according to their value to him? The morning rush kept her too busy for further reflection. Regular customers filed in, ordering their usual breakfasts, complaining about the weather, gossiping about neighbors. Normal life resuming its rhythm as if the previous night had never happened. Only Gina's curious glances and whispered questions about that man from last night served as reminders. Lucia deflected with practiced ease, claiming he'd simply felt ill and left shortly after everyone else. Didn't look like simply ill to me, Gina persisted. He looked half dead. And since when do you escort customers out personally? Since they might pass out and sue us, Lucia replied, balancing plates along her arm. Drop it, Gina. It was nothing. By the end of her shift, Lucia had almost convinced herself it was true. Nothing had happened. She'd helped someone in need as she would have helped anyone. The fact that he was Dominic Russo was irrelevant. 3 days passed in the familiar routine of work, home, sleep, repeat. No sign of Dominic, no mysterious black cars watching the diner, no suited men asking questions. Life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in Lucia's world of endless shifts and mounting bills. On the fourth day, a package arrived at the diner for her. No return address, no note on the outside, just her name in elegant handwriting that somehow looked expensive. Secret admirer? Gina teased, eyeing the package with undisguised curiosity. Hardly, Lucia replied, though her heart had begun to beat faster. Probably just something I ordered. She waited until her break to open it, retreating to the small staff room at the back of the diner. The brown paper wrapping gave way to reveal a book. Not just any book, but a first edition of The Art of Renaissance Florence, a volume she'd mentioned in passing during that strange night. Her fingers traced the embossed cover reverently, hardly daring to believe what she was holding. Inside was a note, just 2 words in the same elegant script. No agenda. Lucia stared at the message, emotions warring within her. The book must have cost thousands. Far more than she could ever afford on a waitress's salary. It was exactly the kind of payment she'd refused that morning in her apartment, just in a different form. And yet, there was something about those 2 words that suggested this wasn't payment at all, but something more complex. A recognition of their conversation, an acknowledgement of her worldview that not everyone had ulterior motives. She should return it. That would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. Draw a firm line between their worlds. Instead, she tucked the note into her pocket and carefully wrapped the book to take home. Just until she figured out what to do with it, she told herself. No decision needed to be made immediately. That evening, as she walked home after her shift, Lucia felt a prickling sensation between her shoulder blades, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She quickened her pace, clutching her bag closer to her body, the precious book a sudden weight. The street was busy with the usual evening crowd, people heading home from work or out to dinner. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the feeling persisted. At the corner, waiting for the light to change, she casually glanced behind her. A black sedan was parked across the street, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. As she watched, it pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into traffic. Coincidence, she told herself. The city was full of black cars. Not everything was connected to Dominic Russo. But the next day she saw it again. And the day after that, a different car, but the same feeling of being observed. By the end of the week, Lucia was jumping at shadows, checking over her shoulder constantly, sleeping poorly. You look terrible, Marco told her bluntly when he stopped by the diner for lunch. What's going on? Nothing, she lied, refilling his water glass. Just tired. Lucia. His voice dropped lower. Is this about him? Has he contacted you? She hesitated, then shook her head. Not exactly. But I think someone might be watching me. Marco's expression darkened. I knew it. I knew helping him would bring trouble. Have you seen him again? No. And I'm not even sure I'm being watched. It could be my imagination. Or it could be that your good deed has put you on someone's radar. Marco pushed his plate away, appetite gone. You need to be careful, Lucia. Maybe stay with me for a while. I can't leave the apartment. The rent is too good and it's convenient for work. Your safety is more important than convenience. Before she could argue further, the bell above the door chimed. Lucia glanced up automatically, then froze. The man who entered wasn't Dominic, but he carried the same aura of controlled danger. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed carved from stone and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a suit that screamed money and power, and his hand rested casually near his hip in a way that suggested a concealed weapon. He scanned the diner methodically before his gaze landed on Lucia. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, assessment, decision, all in the space of a heartbeat. Lucia, Marco whispered urgently, having followed her gaze. Who is that? I don't know, she replied, though she had a sinking feeling she did know, at least by association. The man approached the counter with unhurried confidence, ignoring the curious stares of the other patrons. Lucia Moretti? He asked, his voice a low rumble. She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. Yes. Can I help you? My name is Victor. I work for Mr. Russo. He glanced meaningfully at Marco, then back to her. He would like to speak with you. At your convenience, of course. The polite phrasing didn't disguise the command beneath. This wasn't a request. It was a summons dressed up in courtesy. Why? Marco demanded, standing up. She has nothing to do with your boss. Victor's gaze flicked to Marco, assessing and dismissing him in an instant. This doesn't concern you. My sister concerns me, Marco shot back, stepping closer to Lucia. It's okay, Marco, Lucia said, placing a restraining hand on her brother's arm. To Victor she added, I'm working until 6. After that I'm free. Victor nodded once. A car will be waiting at 6:15. He placed a business card on the counter. If you have any concerns, you can reach me at this number. Without waiting for a response, he turned and left, the bell jingling cheerfully in his wake. You're not going, Marco said immediately. Whatever he wants, it's not worth the risk. Lucia picked up the card, turning it over in her fingers. Plain white with just a name and number, no company or title. I don't think I have a choice. There's always a choice. We could go to the police. And tell them what? That a man politely asked me to meet his boss. She shook her head. Besides, if Dominic wanted to hurt me, he could have done it already. Unless it's not Dominic who wants to see you, Marco argued. What if it's someone who knows you helped him? Someone who might want to use you to get to him. The possibility hadn't occurred to her, and it sent a chill down her spine. What if the cars watching her weren't Dominic's people at all, but his enemies? All the more reason to go, she said finally. At least with Dominic, I know what I'm dealing with. Marco stared at her in disbelief. You don't know him at all. One night of playing nurse doesn't make you an expert on Dominic Russo. I know he could have hurt me that night and didn't. I know he sent me a gift instead of a threat. She met her brother's worried gaze steadily. And I know that ignoring this summons is probably more dangerous than accepting it. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected connections and dangerous choices, hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories. In our final part, we'll discover what Dominic wants from Lucia, and whether her act of kindness will lead to something beautiful or something deadly. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unlikely teachers. Stay tuned to find out how this story ends. In our final part, Lucia is about to meet with Dominic again after receiving his mysterious summons. Will this meeting bring closure or complications to her life? Let's find out. At precisely 6:15, Lucia stepped outside the diner, her hair freshly brushed and her uniform exchanged for the simple black dress she kept in her locker for emergencies. It wasn't fancy, but it was better than meeting Dominic Russo in a ketchup-stained apron. Marco had argued with her until the last minute, finally extracting a promise that she would text him every hour and call immediately if she felt threatened. He'd wanted to follow the car, but Lucia had convinced him that would only make things worse. If I'm not back by midnight, then you can panic, she told him, trying to inject humor into a situation that felt increasingly serious. A sleek black Bentley idled at the curb, Victor standing beside the rear door like a statue. He nodded once in acknowledgement as she approached, opening the door without a word. The interior was all buttery leather and polished wood, the kind of luxury Lucia had only seen in magazines. She slid onto the seat, trying not to look as intimidated as she felt. Where are we going? She asked as Victor took his place behind the wheel. Mr. Russo's residence, he replied, pulling smoothly into traffic. Lucia's stomach tightened. She'd expected a restaurant, perhaps, or some neutral location. Not his home. The personal nature of the invitation added another layer of complexity to an already confusing situation. They drove in silence through the city, moving from her working-class neighborhood into progressively more affluent areas. Finally, they turned onto a private drive that wound through manicured grounds before revealing a modernist mansion of glass and stone, dramatically lit against the evening sky. This is where he lives. Lucia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Victor's eyes met hers briefly in the rearview mirror. One of his residences, yes. Of course a man like Dominic would have multiple homes. Probably in multiple countries. The thought made Lucia acutely aware of the vast gulf between their worlds. The car stopped at the front entrance, where Victor opened her door and led her into a soaring foyer with a view straight through to an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the city lights beyond. The house was a statement of power and wealth, designed to impress and intimidate. This way, Victor directed, leading her through the minimalist space to a room that seemed more lived in than the rest of the house. A study, she realized, with walls of books, comfortable leather furniture, and a desk positioned to take advantage of the spectacular view. It felt like the heart of the house, A place where its owner actually spent time rather than just displayed his wealth. Wait here, Victor instructed. Mr. Russo will join you shortly. Then she was alone, surrounded by more books than she'd ever seen outside a library. Unable to resist, she moved to the nearest shelf, running her fingers along the spines. First editions, rare volumes, books in multiple languages. A collection that spoke of genuine appreciation rather than mere acquisition. See anything you like? Lucia turned quickly to find Dominic standing in the doorway, watching her with that same intense gaze she remembered from the diner. He looked completely recovered, dressed in casual elegance, dark trousers and a light sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Your collection is impressive, she said, finding her voice. Though I'm more interested in why I'm here to see it. A smile touched his lips, genuine amusement rather than the cold calculation she'd expected. Direct as always. Please sit. He gestured to a seating area near the windows. Lucia chose an armchair, perching on its edge rather than settling in. Dominic noticed, of course. She was learning that he noticed everything. You're uncomfortable, he observed, taking the seat across from her. Understandable, given the circumstances. Which circumstances would those be? She asked. The fact that I found you poisoned in my diner, or that you've apparently had me watched for the past week? His eyebrows rose slightly. You noticed. I'm observant. Comes with the job. So it does. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Yes, I've had people watching you. For your protection, not surveillance. Why protection? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. From what? From whom? He corrected. The same people who tried to kill me might have connected you to me after that night. I couldn't take that risk. Lucia absorbed this, unsure whether to be grateful or alarmed. And the book? Was that also for my protection? Something like embarrassment flickered across his features, so brief she might have imagined it. That was, a thank you. For saving my life. I didn't save your life. My brother did. Your brother provided medical treatment. You provided something else entirely. His dark eyes held hers. You showed me kindness when you had every reason not to. That's rare in my experience. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the calculated charm of a man used to getting his way, but something more vulnerable, more genuine. So you brought me here to say thank you? She asked, still not quite believing that was all there was to it. Partly. He stood, moving to a sideboard where a decanter of amber liquid caught the light. Drink. No thank you. He poured himself a small measure, then returned to his seat. I also wanted to warn you. About the Vannucci family. He took a sip of his drink, his expression darkening. They were behind the poisoning attempt. My people confirmed it yesterday. And this concerns me because they know someone helped me that night. They don't know who yet, but they're looking. His gaze was steady, unflinching. And the Vannuccis aren't known for their forgiveness or restraint. A chill ran through Lucia as the full implications sank in. So those cars watching me were for your protection, he repeated. But it may not be enough. The Vannuccis have resources, informants throughout the city. It's only a matter of time before they connect you to me. I'm not connected to you, she protested. I helped you once. That's it. In my world, that's enough. He set his glass down, leaning forward again. Which brings me to the real reason I asked you here tonight. I want to offer you a way out. A way out, she repeated slowly. Of what exactly? This city. This life. He gestured vaguely. I have properties in Europe, South America, anywhere you'd like to go. You and your brother both. New identities, new start, all expenses covered. Lucia stared at him, momentarily speechless. You want me to, what? Disappear? Leave everything behind because some people I don't even know might be looking for me. I want you to be safe, he said simply. By running away. Abandoning my life, my job, everything I've worked for. What exactly would you be abandoning, Lucia? His voice was gentle but direct. A job that barely covers your bills? An apartment above a diner? Dreams of art school that you've put aside to support your brother. The accuracy of his assessment stung. You've been investigating me. I like to know who I'm dealing with. We're not dealing with anything, she shot back. We're two people who crossed paths briefly. That's all. Is it? He held her gaze. Then why did you keep the book? The question caught her off guard. How did you? If you'd returned it or thrown it away, my people would have known. A hint of that smile again. As I said, I like to know who I'm dealing with. Lucia stood, suddenly needing distance from his penetrating gaze. She moved to the window, looking out at the glittering city below. Her city for all its flaws and struggles. I kept it because it was beautiful, she said finally. And because it reminded me of something I'd lost. Not because I wanted anything from you. She heard him rise, felt his presence behind her, not touching but close enough that she could sense his warmth. I believe you, he said quietly. Which is why I'm trying to help you now. The Venuccis won't see you as innocent. They'll see you as a means to hurt me. And would it, she asked, turning to face him, hurt you if something happened to me? The question hung between them, more intimate than she'd intended. For a moment, Dominic's carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something raw and unexpected. Yes, he admitted. It would. The simple honesty of his answer shifted something in the atmosphere between them. This wasn't just about debt or protection or the code of his world. This was something more personal, more complicated. I can't just leave, she said, her voice softer now. Marco has school, his future. I have responsibilities. Your brother could continue his education anywhere. Better schools, in fact. Dominic moved to a desk, retrieving a folder. I've taken the liberty of researching options. Oxford, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, any medical school in the world would be open to him. Lucia took the folder, leafing through pages of information on international medical programs. The thoroughness was both impressive and unsettling. And what about me? She asked. What would I do in this new life you're offering? Whatever you want. He gestured to the art books on his shelves. Study art history in Florence. Learn restoration in Paris. Or something else entirely. The choice would be yours. The possibilities he described were so tempting, so close to the dreams she'd abandoned, that it made her chest ache. A life without constant financial worry, without endless shifts and aching feet. A life where she could pursue her passions instead of just surviving. Why? She asked, the question that had been nagging at her since his offer. Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know? Dominic was silent for a moment, considering his words carefully. In my world, debts must be paid. You saved my life, so I owe you a life in return. That's simple. No, he admitted. Nothing about this is simple. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. The truth is, you intrigue me, Lucia Moretti. Your compassion, your strength, your refusal to be intimidated by me. You saw me at my most vulnerable and didn't use it against me. That's unprecedented in my experience. So I'm a novelty, she said, trying to maintain her emotional distance despite his proximity. You're a revelation, he corrected. A reminder that there are still people in this world who act out of genuine kindness rather than calculation. His words touched something deep inside her, a recognition of how rare such understanding was. How many people in her life truly saw her, appreciated the choices she'd made and the strength it took to make them. I need time, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make tonight. And I need to talk to Marco. Of course. Dominic stepped back, giving her space. Take whatever time you need. The offer stands. He reached into his pocket, producing a small card with a number handwritten on it. This is my private line. Not my assistant, not my security. Me. If you need anything at all, call it. Lucia took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. And if I decide to stay? If Marco and I both decide this is our home despite the risks? Dominic's expression grew serious. Then I'll do everything in my power to protect you here. But I can't guarantee your safety the way I could if you left. No one can guarantee safety, she said softly. Not even Dominic Russo. A shadow crossed his face. I'm learning that. Victor appeared at the doorway, a silent reminder that the outside world still existed beyond this strange bubble they'd created. I should go, Lucia said, suddenly aware of how late it had grown. My brother will be worried. Dominic nodded. Victor will take you home. As they walked back through the impressive house, Lucia felt the weight of the decision before her. Stay in the life she knew with its struggles and limitations but also its familiarity and connections. Or leap into the unknown, a life of possibility but also uncertainty, tied in some indefinable way to this complex, dangerous man. At the door, Dominic stopped her with a light touch on her arm. Lucia, whatever you decide, know that meeting you has changed things for me. What things? She asked. My perspective. His eyes held hers. You reminded me that there's more to life than power and control. That kindness isn't always a weakness. The ride back to her apartment was a blur of streetlights and thoughts too tangled to unravel. Victor remained silent, respecting her preoccupation or perhaps simply following orders. When they arrived at the diner, he escorted her to the side entrance that led to her apartment stairs. Mr. Russo values you, Victor said unexpectedly as they reached the door. That's rare. Before she could respond, he was gone, melting back into the night like a shadow. Marco was waiting in her apartment, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. He engulfed her in a hug the moment she entered. Thank God, he breathed. I was about to call the police. I'm fine, she assured him, extracting herself from his embrace. Better than fine, actually. She told him everything. Dominic's warning about the Venucci's, his offer of new lives abroad, the educational opportunities that awaited Marco at the world's best medical schools. This is insane, Marco said when she finished. We can't just disappear because some mafia boss has taken an interest in you. It's not about his interest, Lucia corrected. It's about the danger we might be in because I helped him. A danger that wouldn't exist if you hadn't helped him in the first place. So I should have let him die on the diner floor? She challenged. That's not who we are, Marco. That's not who Mom and Dad raised us to be. The mention of their parents sobered him. No, he admitted. It's not. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. But this is crazy, Lucia. Moving to another country, new identities. It's like something out of a movie, not real life. I know. She sat beside him. But what if it's also an opportunity? You at a top medical school, me finally able to study art. The things we've always wanted but couldn't afford. At what cost, though? Marco looked at her searchingly. What does he really want from you? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe something I'm not prepared to give. But I do know that staying here means always wondering if today is the day the Venucci's figure out who helped Dominic that night. They talked until dawn, weighing options, arguing, reconciling, imagining futures neither had dared to consider before. By the time the first light of morning filtered through the blinds, they had reached a tentative decision. 3 days later, Lucia stood in the diner for the last time, looking around at the place that had been the center of her life for so long. The checkered floor, the worn counter, the booth where Dominic had collapsed. It all seemed smaller somehow, as if she were already viewing it from a distance. Gina approached, concern etched on her face. You sure about this, Lucia? It's all so sudden. The cover story was simple. A distant relative had died, leaving Lucia and Marco an unexpected inheritance. They were moving to pursue educational opportunities they couldn't afford before. Close enough to the truth to be believable, vague enough to protect them. I'm sure, Lucia said, hugging her friend. It's time for a change. Outside, a car waited, not the ostentatious Bentley, but a more discreet sedan with tinted windows. Marco was already at the airport with the first wave of their meager belongings, preparing for the journey to their new home in Florence. As Lucia slid into the back seat, she found she wasn't alone. Dominic sat beside her, elegant as always in a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. I didn't expect you to come personally, she said, surprised. I wanted to make sure you didn't have second thoughts. His eyes searched hers. Do you? Lucia looked back at the diner, at the life she was leaving behind. The struggles and disappointments, but also the simple joys and hard-won achievements. No, she said finally, turning back to him. No second thoughts. Good. He nodded to the driver who pulled away from the curb. Your brother is already checked in. Private flight, no passport control. By this time tomorrow, you'll be starting your new lives. What about you? Lucia asked as they drove through the city streets, passing landmarks she might never see again. Will I see you again? Dominic's expression softened slightly. If you wish to. I have business in Florence occasionally. But there's no obligation, Lucia. This new life is yours, free and clear. No strings, no expectations. No agenda, she said, echoing the note he'd sent with the book. Exactly. He hesitated, then added, though I would like to know how you're settling in. If that's acceptable. The vulnerability in the request touched her. This powerful, dangerous man asking permission for something so simple. I'd like that, she admitted. The airport appeared ahead, private hangars separate from the main terminals. As they pulled up to one, Lucia saw Marco waiting beside a sleek jet, looking both excited and terrified. One last thing, Dominic said as the car stopped. He reached into his jacket, producing a small velvet box. A parting gift. Lucia took it hesitantly. Inside was a delicate gold pendant, a small, perfect paintbrush crossed with what looked like an olive branch. Art and peace, Dominic explained. I wish for your new life. The thoughtfulness of the gift, so perfectly aligned with who she was rather than what she could do for him, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. No, he said, his voice low and sincere. Thank you, Lucia Moretti. For reminding me of what humanity looks like. As the plane soared over the city, Lucia watched the landscape of her old life grow smaller, the buildings and streets where she'd struggled and survived reduced to a miniature model below. The pendant rested against her skin, a tangible reminder of the strange twist of fate that had changed everything. Beside her, Marco dozed, exhausted from the whirlwind of preparations. Ahead lay Florence, art, education, the dreams they'd both deferred for so long now suddenly within reach. And somewhere behind, a man who had shown her that people could surprise you, that even those with the darkest reputations could possess unexpected depth. And that sometimes the most meaningful connections came from the most unlikely encounters. 6 months later, Lucia stood before an easel in a sun-drenched studio in Florence, her hands stained with paint, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Marco was thriving at medical school, already talking about specializations and research opportunities. Their apartment in the historic center of the city overlooked terracotta rooftops and Renaissance spires, a daily reminder of the beauty that had drawn her to art in the first place. The buzzer sounded, pulling her from her concentration. She wiped her hands on a cloth and moved to the intercom. Yes. Delivery for Lucia Moretti, came the response. Puzzled. She wasn't expecting anything. She buzzed the delivery person up. When she opened the door, she found not a package but a single perfect white rose and a card. In Florence on business. Dinner tonight if you're free. No agenda. D. Lucia touched the pendant at her throat, a smile spreading across her face. Some connections, it seemed, were meant to continue despite the odds and across any distance. She picked up her phone and dialed the number she'd memorized but never used. Dominic? It's Lucia. Yes, I'm free tonight. As she hung up, she looked around at her new life. The art supplies, the books, the view of a city that had nurtured some of history's greatest artists. All made possible by one moment of compassion in a late-night diner, when she'd chosen kindness over fear. Sometimes the smallest choices led to the most profound changes. Sometimes saving someone else was the first step to saving yourself. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most unlikely people could lead you to exactly where you were meant to be. If you enjoyed this story about how one act of kindness can change multiple lives, please hit that like button and subscribe to Serafina's stories. Remember that compassion is never wasted, even when offered to those others might deem undeserving. The most beautiful connections often begin in the most unexpected moments. Until next time, this is Serafina, reminding you that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always.